A homeless woman finds a millionaire's wallet while searching for a job on the street, and he falls madly in love. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Let's dive into the story together. A cold wind swept down the quiet street, tossing scraps of silver paper across the sidewalk like forgotten confetti. Sarah walked slowly. Dark circles hung heavy beneath her eyes. Her stomach knotted in on itself. 3 days without a proper meal. Her sneakers, torn and peeling, exposed her pale, frozen toes. She had no destination, no one waiting, but still she kept walking. Then, something caught her eye near the curb. A wallet. Deep brown leather, smooth, clean, definitely not discarded by someone worse off than her. Sarah bent down, her fingers trembling from hunger. She picked it up, opened it. Cash. Thick, neatly stacked. Crisp $100 bills. Thousands, maybe more. Just one bill, one, could buy her a warm sandwich, a bottle of water, maybe a safe night indoors. But there was more. Credit cards, ID, a sleek metal business card that shimmered in the pale light. Henry Mitchell, chairman and CEO, the Mitchell Group with an address. Uptown. The kind of place people like her didn't belong. Sarah swallowed hard. Her grip tightened. In that moment, it was just her and the wallet. No witnesses, no cameras, no one watching, just her conscience. Then came a voice. Gentle, wavering, but one she knew deep in her bones. Her grandmother's voice. Do what's right, even when no one's watching. That's when it matters most. She stood still. For a long time. So long her fingers began to go numb from the cold. Then she slid the bills back inside. Closed the wallet. Firmly. She tucked it into the pocket of her worn-out coat. And turned. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew she was going to that address. If you were Sarah, would you have kept the wallet? Or returned it? Starving, freezing, and with nothing left to lose? Her story begins with that choice. And no one, not even her, could have imagined where it would lead. The iron gates towered above her, tall, ornate, and cold as stone. On the other side lay a world she had never touched. Wide marble steps, manicured lawns, a fountain dancing in silence. The kind of place Sarah had only seen in glossy magazines left behind at bus stops. She stood at the call box, her fingers hovering above the intercom button. Her coat, patched at the elbows, clung to her like a second skin. The wallet was still warm in her pocket, its weight far heavier than just leather and paper. She pressed the button. A sharp buzz. No answer. Again, this time a click, followed by a clipped, impatient voice. Yes? Sarah cleared her throat. I need to speak with Mr. Henry Mitchell. Please, it's important. Silence, then a static sigh. Mr. Mitchell doesn't meet with strangers, especially unexpected ones. Sarah stepped closer. Tell him it's about something he lost. I'm not asking for anything. I just need to speak with him. For 5 minutes. There was a pause. Then the line went dead. She waited. 1 minute. 2. The gate remained closed. Suddenly footsteps echoed beyond the bars. A man appeared. Security uniform crisp, dark sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. He looked her up and down like someone examining an expired carton of milk. What's your name? He asked without greeting Sarah. He folded his arms, jaw tight. Sarah who? Just Sarah, she said, meeting his stare. He scoffed. Look, lady, we don't do handouts here. You want charity? Try the shelter 2 blocks down. I'm not here for charity, she said evenly. Right. He eyed her shoes, ripped, wet, barely holding together. So what are you here for? A job? A miracle? At that moment, a sleek black car pulled up the drive. The window rolled down just enough to reveal a woman in designer sunglasses. Blonde. Polished. Cruel. She glanced at Sarah, then spoke to the guard like Sarah couldn't hear. Don't waste time. Girls like her just want a story to sell, or a lawsuit. The car rolled on. The words stayed. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Her fingers twitched, but her eyes stayed locked on the guard. "If Henry Mitchell finds out I was here and you didn't let me speak with him," she said, her voice low but sharp, "he'll regret it, and so will you." The man narrowed his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No," she said, calm as stone. "That's a promise." For a moment, the gate held them apart like two different species, but then something shifted in the man's face. Not fear, not respect, but hesitation. "Wait here," he muttered, turning toward the estate. Sarah exhaled slowly. Her hands were trembling, but her gaze never once dropped. The heavy iron gates creaked open, slowly, deliberately, as if unsure whether the woman standing on the other side deserved to enter or not. Sarah didn't flinch. She stood rooted to the damp stone sidewalk, her chin lifted, her shoulders squared against the wind. Behind her, the city buzzed and blurred, buses hissed, tires splashed through puddles, but she no longer heard it. All she could feel was the weight of the wallet in her pocket, and the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She stepped through the gate as it widened, past the towering columns, onto a cobblestone driveway that looked too pristine to walk on in tattered shoes. The house loomed in front of her, a mansion wrapped in polished glass, stone, and silence. The kind of silence that only comes from wealth, calm, curated, untouchable. Then she saw him. He descended the stone steps without a word, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding a phone, which he slipped away without glancing. His posture was precise, relaxed, but with an unmistakable authority that had probably never needed raising its voice to command a room. Henry Mitchell. Up close, he looked different than the public photos. Less polished, more human. His dark hair was swept back in effortless waves, a touch of silver at the temples. His jawline was strong, but there were lines near his mouth, the kind that deepen from years of tight-lipped restraint rather than laughter. He stopped a few paces in front of her. His eyes were pale, steel blue, and they scanned her in one sweeping glance, not with cruelty, but with something colder. Calculation. As if trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't been expecting this morning. Sarah didn't avert her eyes. She didn't shift or apologize for the worn coat clinging to her shoulders, or the mud-stained shoes she had tried to clean on the grass outside the gate. She simply reached into her coat pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the wallet. Both hands. No words yet. Henry's gaze dropped to the object. His brow twitched. Subtle, but it was the first crack in his mask. She stepped forward and extended it. Her voice was calm. Even. Almost quiet. "I didn't take anything. I just wanted to return it." No preamble, no explanation, no appeal for help or praise. He took the wallet carefully, not like a man reclaiming a lost possession, but like someone realizing he was holding something far more delicate than it appeared. He opened it. The bills were untouched, still aligned with the tidy discipline of a man used to order. The cards, IDs, even the handwritten note he'd scribbled to himself that morning. All there. He looked up. "Why?" he asked, his voice low and slightly hoarse. Not skeptical, just searching. Sarah met his gaze. There was no desperation in her eyes, no self-pity, only something harder to name. Resolve, fatigue, a kind of dignity born not from pride, but survival. "Because I'd know," she said, "and I've already lost more than I can afford to. I won't lose myself, too." That landed. Somewhere behind his eyes, past the defense mechanisms of a man long surrounded by flattery, negotiation, and manipulation, her words found their mark. He didn't speak right away, just studied her. In that silence, Sarah shifted her weight slightly. not to retreat, just to ground herself. Her fingers curled into her sleeves for warmth. Henry blinked slowly, then nodded once, as if making a private decision. He closed the wallet, slipped it into his jacket, and said, "Come inside." Sarah's brow tightened. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I just wanted to return it, I know." He looked past her for a second. The city skyline glittered through the iron bars like a separate universe. "But it's freezing, and you look like you haven't had a real drink in days. Come in, just for tea." The words weren't warm, but they weren't cold either. They were neutral, the kind of offer from a man unused to making small talk, but not unfamiliar with responsibility. Sarah hesitated. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she hadn't stepped into anyone's home in months, and never one like this. Still, she nodded. "Just once." "All right." He turned and led her toward the house. His footsteps were measured, confident. Hers, quieter, but no less sure. As they ascended the steps together, neither of them knew what this would become. Not the girl with cracked fingers and a steel spine, not the man with too many walls and one quietly breaking. But something had shifted, and not just in the air between them. The gates closed behind her. And just like that, Sarah stepped out of survival and into something entirely unknown. The door to the mansion closed behind them with a soft click, muffling the outside world. The cold, the city noise, the weight of judgment, left at the gate. Inside, silence stretched across the grand interior like a silk sheet. No footsteps, no conversation. Only the distant hum of heating vents and the occasional creak of timber, too old to remain silent forever. Sarah followed Henry across the gleaming marble floor, her eyes adjusting to the warm light filtering in from the tall windows. The house was beautiful, but not in a showy way. It was elegant, quiet, like a museum curated by someone who loved order more than people. She didn't touch anything. Her shoes left faint, wet marks on the floor, but she didn't try to hide them. Henry gestured toward a sitting room. "Wait here," he said gently. "I'll bring some tea." She nodded, still hesitant to speak, still unsure if she truly belonged in this space. And then he was gone. The silence returned. Sarah stood for a long moment before slowly lowering herself onto the edge of the sofa. It was too soft, too clean. She perched like someone waiting for permission. Her fingers curled together in her lap. The room smelled faintly of wood polish and citrus. Everything was perfect, untouched, except for the faint click of something small on the floor. She turned. From the hallway, just beyond the open archway, a child emerged. A little boy, no older than 6. Pale pajamas patterned with tiny stars. Barefoot, holding a small red toy car in one hand. His hair was slightly tousled, the way it always is after sleep. But his eyes looked older than they should. Heavy, shadowed, as if they'd seen too much too soon. He didn't speak. Neither did Sarah. They looked at each other across the space between rug and doorway. Not strangers. Not yet anything else either. Sarah smiled gently. The boy blinked once, clutching his toy. "Hi," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the warmth in the room. He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. Instead, slowly, he walked into the room, his steps soft against the rug, and sat down on the floor a few feet away from her. Still silent. Still watching. Sarah didn't move toward him. She didn't ask his name. She didn't reach out. She did what no adult had done with him in a very long time. She waited. Then, softly, she leaned forward and pointed to the car. "Is it fast?" The boy tilted his head, looked at her. Then, shyly, he nodded. Sarah's smile widened. Just a little. I bet it flies. She reached behind her and took one of the couch cushions. She slid it gently to the floor, angling it like a ramp. Her movements were slow, intentional, like handling a fragile bird. Want to try? The boy looked at the ramp, then at his car, then at her. He scooted forward and placed the car at the top of the cushion, hesitated. Then, zip, thump. The little red car rolled down, bumped into a table leg, and tipped onto its side. The boy looked up and laughed, soft, light, uncontrolled. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long, but it was real. It was the sound of a door opening, just a crack. And from the far end of the hall, unseen by Sarah, Henry Mitchell stood frozen. He hadn't meant to stop. He had only returned with the tea. 2 cups on a silver tray, steam curling gently from their rims. But when he heard the sound, that high, sudden burst of laughter, he paused. The tray shook in his hands. It had been 3 years, 3 years since his son had laughed like that. Not out of politeness, not in front of a therapist, not because someone tried to force it, but because, for a brief, fleeting second, he forgot to be sad. Henry stepped forward slowly, stopping just before the archway. There, in the soft light of the sitting room, Sarah knelt on the floor beside his son, arranging couch cushions into a zigzagging racetrack. The boy followed her lead with quiet excitement, now pushing his car down the ramp again, giggling when it bumped a pillow. Sarah didn't overdo it. She didn't praise or coax or ask questions. She just played. Present. Calm. Gentle. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan looked like a little boy again. Henry gripped the tray tighter. His throat constricted, but he made no sound. No move to interrupt. He just stood there, watching a woman who had been a stranger half an hour ago quietly give back something he thought was gone forever. Not with speeches, not with strategy, but with the simplest thing of all: presence. The cups sat untouched on the edge of the low table in the sitting room, their steam having faded into memory. But neither Sarah nor Henry seemed to notice. The room, still gently lit by afternoon light, had become a quiet space of unexpected stillness. Henry sat in the armchair across from Sarah, his elbows resting on his knees, his fingers loosely interlaced. He had been watching her for several minutes now, not in the way one observes a guest, but as someone trying to put a name to a feeling that didn't quite fit a definition. Sarah, meanwhile, sat upright on the edge of the couch, her hands wrapped around the now lukewarm porcelain. She hadn't taken more than a sip. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because her nerves hadn't quite let go. She was inside, warm, dry, not chased off with cold stares or clipped commands. It all felt unreal. But the laughter, Ethan's laughter, that was real, and it lingered like the echo of wind chimes after the breeze had passed. Henry cleared his throat softly. He laughed, he said, more to himself than to her. Sarah looked up, hesitant. I wasn't trying to. I know, he interrupted gently. That's what makes it matter. A beat passed. He stood, walked slowly to the window, and let his eyes settle on the backyard. It was still and green, the trees motionless. A different kind of silence now, one that waited rather than weighed. He turned back to face her. My son hasn't spoken to anyone willingly in almost a year. He hasn't laughed. Not like that. In 3. Sarah said nothing. She didn't know what to say. Her instinct was to retreat, to hand the moment back before it became too much. Henry stepped forward, not aggressively, but with intention. His voice was calm, measured. I want to offer you something, but I need you to hear me before you say no. Sarah's shoulders stiffened slightly, but she nodded. I'd like you to stay here, Work here, as Ethan's caregiver." The words hung in the air between them like something sacred and fragile. Sarah blinked. "No," she said, softly but firmly. I'm not someone you rescue." Henry didn't react. He had expected that answer. He walked to the mantel, picked up a small photo frame, and studied it. A woman's face smiled back from behind the glass. Beautiful, kind-eyed, the resemblance to Ethan unmistakable. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said. "Since then, I've had 5 therapists, 3 professional caregivers, 2 live-in nannies. None of them got a word out of him." He turned the frame toward her for just a second, then placed it back without looking up. "But you didn't try to fix him. You didn't push. You didn't promise anything. You just sat on the floor." Sarah's hands tightened around the cup. "I don't want your pity," she said quietly. "I can't live under someone's guilt." He looked at her directly now, not with the detachment of a businessman, but with something warmer, grounded. "This isn't pity. This is trust. And frankly, I don't give that easily." Sarah studied him. The weight behind his voice wasn't performative. It didn't come from obligation. It came from a man who had built his life on contracts and negotiations, but understood when something real had no terms. She hesitated. The idea of staying, of working, of belonging somewhere, terrified her more than sleeping outside had ever done. But Ethan's face flashed in her mind. The way he had sat beside her without question. The way he'd laughed when the car hit the pillow. No one had ever needed her before. Not like that. Slowly she set the cup down on the table, the soft clink of porcelain breaking the quiet. Her voice came low, measured, but steady. What would that even look like? Henry didn't smile, but there was a shift in him, a release of breath, a quiet assurance. "It looks like a private room down the hall from his, a salary, one you've earned, meals with dignity, your own key, and no strings." Sarah sat back slightly, processing. No conditions, no charity, just a job. One built not on desperation, but on belief. She nodded once, then again. Not quickly, but with the slow, deliberate motion of someone who knew this moment was a turning point. Henry extended a hand across the space. She took it. And just like that, for the first time in years, Sarah had something more than shelter. She had a chance. A real one. And she wasn't going to waste it. The rain had stopped by evening, but the sky still held the hush of something unfinished. Inside the house, the soft glow of pendant lights spilled across the kitchen's polished counters, casting everything in a gentle amber. Steam rose from the kettle. The walls held the kind of silence that made even shallow breaths feel sacred. Sarah stood at the kitchen island, folding a clean dish towel, though her hands had stopped moving minutes ago. The dress box had been sitting unopened on the stool beside her since noon. She had touched it only once, grazing the ribbon like it might dissolve. Behind her, Henry leaned quietly against the doorframe. His sleeves were rolled back to the elbows. No tie, no shield. Just a man who had spent the whole day wondering how to say something that didn't fit neatly into language. "I didn't know your size," he said gently. Sarah turned, startled, not having heard him come in. He motioned to the box. "My sister helped. She said navy blue makes people feel safe." His voice softened at the edges. "I wanted you to feel that." Sarah glanced down at the box, then back up at him. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Henry stepped closer. Not too much, just enough that the space between them felt intentional. "I have this company event," he said. "You'd hate it." A small smile broke at the corner of her mouth. "It's loud. People talk too much. Half of them pretend they care more than they do. But I'd like you to be there. Her smile faded slowly, replaced by something more fragile. I wouldn't fit in. Henry looked at her for a long moment, then said, quietly, firmly, the most valuable thing you could bring is yourself. He didn't dress the words in flowers. He didn't try to impress. He just meant them. Completely. Sarah lowered her gaze. Her hand rested on the countertop, fingers splayed, as if steadying herself against a question she hadn't let herself ask. What if this wasn't temporary? What if someone like her could be more than a passing kindness? She didn't answer. Not with words. But that night, as the clock struck 6, Henry waited at the base of the stairs, adjusting the cuff of his shirt, trying not to check the time again. When Sarah appeared, slowly, carefully, as if walking through a dream, he forgot how to breathe for a moment. The dress was simple. The color deepened under the light like a twilight sky. Her hair, pulled softly away from her face, revealed nothing flashy. Only her eyes, steady and uncertain. The earrings he'd chosen shimmered like they had found the right place to belong. She looked at him, not expecting approval, just bracing for something. Henry didn't speak. He didn't need to. He offered his arm, and when she took it, lightly, like testing if it would hold, something shifted. Not loudly, just enough. The evening passed in murmurs and champagne flutes and too much laughter from people who rarely meant it. Henry never left her side. He didn't parade her. He simply stood near, every glance a reassurance, every word a thread pulling her gently into the room. And when the music faded and the car ride home wound through quiet streets, Henry's voice was low. "Stay for a minute," he said when they reached the house. She followed him into the kitchen again. It looked different at night, warmer, like the walls remembered something. He poured her a cup of tea. Didn't ask questions, didn't say much. When she set it down and met his eyes, he spoke, soft, almost broken. "I didn't expect you, but since you came into our lives, everything changed." Ethan laughs again. "I come home because I want to, and I don't know what this is between us, but I know it's not small." Sarah stared at him. Her breath caught. Not because she hadn't dreamed of this moment, she had, but because hearing it aloud meant she couldn't pretend anymore. "I don't belong in your world, Henry," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're everything I'm not." He shook his head once. "Steady. You're everything I forgot I needed." Her eyes welled, but she didn't blink. And when he stepped just close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence, not demanding, not assuming, Sarah exhaled. Long, quiet. Her heart beat louder than any words she could find, and she didn't run. Not this time. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, soft and golden, painting long beams across the floor. The house felt calm, as if holding its breath. Distantly, the scent of toast and cinnamon lingered in the air, mingling with the warmth of something deeper. Belonging. Sarah stood at the end of the hallway, watching Ethan hunched over the low table in the sunroom. He had been there for nearly an hour, quiet but focused, his tongue peeking out between his lips in concentration, a box of crayons scattered around him like candy. She didn't want to interrupt. Moments like these felt rare and sacred. Eventually, Ethan looked up and noticed her. His face lit up, not with surprise, but with that steady joy she had learned to treasure. He held up the paper, smudged and curled slightly at the edges. "Look," he said. "It's us." Sarah walked in, slowly, carefully. He placed the drawing in her hands. 3 figures stood beneath a blue sky, stick arms and round heads, but unmistakably them. Henry stood tall on the left, Ethan in the middle with a toy rocket in his hand, and on the right, Sarah in a long dress, smiling. Above them, in crooked but determined handwriting, was a single line. Me, Dad, Sarah. She stared at the drawing, her breath catching at the simplicity and weight of it. The figures held hands. A red heart floated just above their heads. No words could have said it better. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, something that had been locked away for years. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't a stranger, not a visitor, not a temporary solution. She was part of something. Maybe for the first time, I'm not someone who doesn't belong. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed and the house had quieted, Henry called her into the garden. Lanterns swayed gently from the branches overhead, casting soft pools of light onto the grass. The air was cool, scented with early spring. He stood waiting, one hand tucked into his pocket, the other holding something behind his back. Sarah stepped outside slowly, unsure. Henry smiled. Not the usual reserved curve of his lips, but something warmer, open. I used to think I had everything, he said quietly. Then I lost Olivia, and I thought I'd never have anything again. But then, you showed up. She said nothing. Her eyes searched his, not with suspicion, but hope and fear. Henry took a breath and stepped forward. I didn't fall in love with you because you saved my son, or because you reminded me how to laugh. I love you because you stayed. You looked at our mess and didn't flinch. He revealed the small velvet box from behind his back and opened it slowly. Inside, a delicate gold ring. Simple, honest, beautiful. Will you stay for good? Henry opened it without a word. Inside was the test, still warm from being held in her hands, and a folded slip of paper that simply read, We're not just 3 anymore. At first, he didn't move. His fingers stayed curled around the box, as if holding it too tightly might break the moment. Then slowly, he looked up at her. There were no grand gestures, just one sentence, spoken with a voice that trembled slightly at the edges. Are you sure? Sarah nodded. That was all it took. Henry stood and pulled her into a quiet embrace. His head rested gently against hers. She felt his heartbeat, steady, strong, protective. When they pulled apart, he looked into her eyes and said, The most valuable thing that wallet ever carried wasn't the money. It was the path that led me to you. The next morning, Ethan came skipping into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes with one hand and holding a crayon drawing in the other. When he saw the way Sarah was holding her belly, when he saw the quiet smile Henry gave her across the table, he stopped. Something in his young heart understood. Is there a baby? He asked, voice small and awed. Sarah nodded slowly. Ethan's eyes widened. His mouth fell open, then quickly curled into a beam of pure light. Really? She nodded again, laughing through tears. He ran to her and threw his arms around her middle, not hard, just enough to let the baby know he was already there. Don't worry, he whispered to her belly. I'll protect you, just like Mom protected me. Sarah froze, just for a second. Her eyes met Henry's across the room. Mom. He had said Mom, not Sarah, not her. Mom. She sank to her knees, holding Ethan tight, tears sliding down her cheeks without apology. Henry knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around them both. This new, growing family, full of stories, scars, and second chances. Outside, the trees swayed softly in the breeze. Light filtered through the branches like a promise, and within the walls of that once empty house, a symphony of life began to play. Quiet, gentle, but unforgettable. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. What did you think of their journey? Do you believe that when we choose to do the right thing, even when no one's watching, The universe rewards us in unexpected ways? Rate this story from 1 to 10 in the comments. We'd love to hear your honest thoughts. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next emotional journey.